and my pleasure to introduce our final speaker, and that is Marcel Salive of the National Institute on Aging, who's going to give us a talk about updates and deprescribing research. And just by brief background, Marcel is a program officer at NIA, where he is responsible for the portfolio on multimorbidity and deprescribing, among several other topics. Those of you who know Marcel know that he's been a big supporter of these things and really critical to our field for moving this forward. Some things that some of you who know Marcel may not know about him is that earlier in his career, he was an intramural investigator at NIH, and then took a little bit of a detour where he was at CMS, where he had a director position, where he led a process for determining coverage decisions for Medicare beneficiaries, then returned to NIA in his current role. In addition to many other things, Marcel is a captain in the US Public Health Service Commission Corps. So Marcel, thank you so much for your support and for being here and sharing your talk.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that introduction. I'm currently retired as a public health service officer, so that's why I'm not wearing my uniform today.
Okay, sorry about that.
But I'm a retired captain, yes. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to everyone, and I really appreciate this meeting, and I have been looking forward to it for quite a long time. So it's my great pleasure to be here. And I want to, give some updates on from NIA's perspective and some opportunities that might be of interest to people. So I'll try to do that quickly. I can't seem to, okay, there we go. I want to just start with some selected grants, just because I think that gives you some perspective on this. So I think the first one is a Pepper Center grant, and that one is a new one which covers multiple chronic conditions at Northwestern. And so some of you know about the Pepper Center program, but it does have some pilot funds available for some of the local investigators to do things in their theme. And since that's their theme, that's very interesting. The next couple on this list are Career Development Awards, and the K76 on the right indicates a Beeson Award. So we have funded several recent career development awards that cover deprescribing in certain specialties. And so we're very excited about that. And I'll give some details on that funding announcement towards the end of the talk. The last one here is more of an observational study on safe prescribing, which I know is relevant to this crowd. So on the next slide, I've listed some trials, and since I think we just segued out of a discussion on the trials, I'll just highlight that the fourth one here listed as Basine was the STRIDE trial, which did have a multifactorial fall prevention strategy that did include some medication adjustments along with exercise and other things, and was negative and was recently published, I believe, in the New England Journal. But as I agree with the comments from moments ago, that it's a challenge. And we are funding some interesting trials here for deprescribing. I think Cynthia Boyd is co-PI of the second one listed. And this first one is on, is out of the NIH HEAL initiative on, non-pharmacologic options for treating post-operative pain that I think is, kind of at the bridge there of prescribing accurately versus deprescribing. We do have a large deprescribing trial, Simmons, that I know is affiliated with this network. And so we're very excited about that. And finally, I wanted to say, I left off this list, one recently funded Deprescribe AD trial that's affiliated with Dr. Tannenbaum, but led by Jerry Gerwitz. And we're very excited about that. And so the mechanism of two-phase pragmatic trials, exemplified by a couple of these grants, is I think the way it is possible to get Deprescribing trials funded by NIH. So NIA, I just want to briefly overview that we have, different foci in our mission, and all the areas except for basic science, I think, have an interest in deprescribing. So we have a division of behavioral and social research down there at the bottom. I am in the division of geriatrics and clinical gerontology, so we have a strong interest there, and also our division of neuroscience, which has a large focus on Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, has an interest in deprescribing as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities at NIA for deprescribing work. And so I'll proceed. One of the things that I think a lot of people have mentioned is, the COVID epidemic, the COVID pandemic. And so NIA and NIH has had a lot of opportunities for funding there. And so I won't reiterate them, but we are funding largely through competing supplements and administrative supplements. And now we're starting in with some new awards to really address this major public health issue. And there's a lot of things on our website about that. NIA now spends around, I'd say, 50 to 60% of our extramural budget on Alzheimer's disease research and related dementias. And so that is a large focus, but we certainly have plenty of money for the non-Alzheimer geriatric projects. But this highlights there are many funding opportunities that are out there specific for Alzheimer's that can be looked for. And I wanted to just highlight this one in red that says Small Research Grant Program for the next generation of researchers in ADRD, which is a small R03 grant that can jumpstart a career. And I will get to the GemStar program shortly, but that is another one that we have. So we have kind of a pair of these that are geared at early stage investigators with a little bit of research and a little bit of career development kind of mixed in the mix there. And so these are, I think, complementary. And so in the fine numbers, there's just a showing that the pay line's much better for the Alzheimer projects, just as in case anyone was wondering about that. So GemStar is viewed as here's a long kind of life cycle of a career of an investigator. We have many funding opportunities all across this, but there was viewed as a gap right around the beginning, the transition from postdoc to early career, when GemStar could take advantage of that and provide some early award, bridging a specialty towards aging. So I think you've heard quite a bit about that. So they have 100K per year for 2 years is this R03 mechanism. And it's open right now. The letter is due, looks like in about 1 week from today, and then the applications in 1 month from that. And so we do reissue this every year. And there's also quite a bit of online material that's available to help with that. But one thing I wanted to highlight is that there's a workshop next week on targeted for people who might be applying for a GemStar. And so that can be found through this clinstar.org website, which is a new program of NIA that's trying to, nurture people who can then apply for the GemStar, get it, and jumpstart their career in aging and potentially for deprescribing. I think we have some GemStars that are in these areas, nothing specifically right now on deprescribing, but it's certainly an option. And I believe quite a good option that people could do. And I'd be happy to discuss individually with people after that webinar who might have questions. The career development, beyond that, we have quite a lot of different numbers that are kind of confusing. I think the way to look at it is most of them are mentored career development awards. We have this research training NIH kiosk that kind of can walk you through that to try to decide. The highest point is this Beeson Award. I think that's the gem in our crown of career development, and has it's normally due around now also, but we did slightly delay it this year in recognition of COVID. So the applications are due in February. And then we expect we'll still fund them around one year from now and next September. So those have a 3 to 5 year project with $225,000 per year allocated to that. And we fund around 7 to 10 of them. And as I showed at the beginning, we have funded several of these with themes of deprescribing in them. So finally, I wanted to get to the research grants, and I want to highlight two recent funding announcements that are on multimorbidity. But I think when you look closely at the multimorbidity portfolio, which I have, a lot of it ties nicely to polypharmacy and then to deprescribing. So there's a couple key points from these funding announcements. There's an actual NIH interest group on comorbidity. So that's one thing that's notable. And so notably then there's about 13 of the 27 institutes and centers are actually signed on to this. And so that way they are expressing interest in funding applications on multimorbidity. And some of them, the second one on this list mentions specifically polypharmacy and is developing interventions that target multimorbidity. So I think deprescribing fits nicely into that second PAR number 20-180. And you can see there that it's not just NIA who is interested, although we're quite interested, but you've now got a lot of interest from the Drug Abuse Institute, mental health, minority health, nursing research, complementary health, behavioral and social research, child health, and the Office of Women's Health. So that's a lot of interest that's potentially out there for this, not just at NIA. Finally, Mike, I think, mentioned I'm a program officer, so I wanted to just give a few pointers at the last part of my talk here of how to work with your program officer, how to find one. There is a matchmaker button now on the NIH Reporter that can find you the most suitable program official and give you their email address. And you can email them a one-pager and have a nice conversation or a back and forth email chat about that Ames page and find out the institute interests, find out some questions you might have answered, specifically if they have any funding targeted or not, and possibly discuss the review and then work with them after the review as well. So many of these things, people know, people don't know, but this is just sort of a summary of it. And hopefully, I'm the one, as Mike said, for multimorbidity and polypharmacy and deprescribing at NIA. And also, if I'm not quite exactly the right person, I can find you the right person and get you that information quickly. So I think that's pretty much it, except for my contact information. So I'm happy to take questions at this time.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Marcel. So if people have questions, please feel free to kind of throw them in the chat box. Marcel, I'll maybe start off with a question just while we're waiting for things to appear in the chat. Getting back to Kara's talk, where she was talking about intersectionality and working with people from diverse disciplines, for example, linguistics or communication or political science, do you have any suggestions for people who are proposing work in those areas, which might be a little bit outside the box from what people think of traditionally as NIH-funded work, and how best to incorporate that kind of thing in a way that's going to be of interest and fundable?
Oh, I think it's actually quite fundable, and it is of high interest to us because I think it's high in the innovation category. And one of the review criteria is innovation. So I think all applications, it's easy in Deprescribing to get a multidisciplinary team. You have to have one practically, but then getting the more unusual collaborators, I think is helpful for that innovation. And then you can discuss with the program officer which study section might be the best place where it can be reviewed, because that sometimes comes up. And when we did this interest group on comorbidity, we looked at where do multimorbidity grants get reviewed at NIH, and we found out that it's actually a shorter list of where they don't get reviewed than where they do get reviewed. They get reviewed practically anywhere. And so we're trying to, I think, narrow it a little bit and make sure there's a good match for the project and the review. And so that's part of what a program officer can help you with.
Excellent. And this maybe speaks to the same thing, but many people who are interested in maybe applying for a career development award of one sort or another, unlike things like RR1s or RR3s that are reviewed outside of the institutes, career awards are viewed by a specific institute. And if someone is saying working in cardiovascular deprescribing or psychotropic deprescribing, what advice might you have to give them about whether to target their work more towards National Institute on Aging or towards their disease-specific institutes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that you have to really essentially ask both institutes for their opinion and judge that and make your decision. So I'm happy to discuss that from the NIA perspective. And I generally don't advise on the other side because I don't know the priorities of those other institutes. And so, because they can change. I even worked at NHLBI. You didn't mention that, but but things have changed so much since then that I can't even give good advice on that topic that you just raised. So, except that NIA, as I listed one, we are funding a cardiologist on their Beeson Award for Deprescribing. So we're happy to do that, but whether NHLBI does, I really don't know.
Great. And one thing that some people in this audience may be unfamiliar with, can you comment on the receptivity of NIA to funding people who are not MDs, pharmacists, nurses, and how people coming from non-MD disciplines should think about presenting their work to NIH?
So even the Beeson has got some non-physicians. I think the GEMSTAR is mostly physicians. So you have to be careful. When you read a funding announcement, you should look at the eligibility of the PI in the section of the funding announcement on that to make sure and check with the program official on that. But the typical K awards have wide eligibility, I think. And so we do fund, I have personally had awardees who were PA, physician assistant, nurses, pharmacists, and physical therapists, epidemiology, PhD. I mean, I think a lot of these, I guess I won't be able to name them all, rattle them all off, but I think we are quite open to that. I think, I'm in the geriatrics branch, and I think we view geriatrics as a shortage specialty, and we have to get a lot of people in to help us out and work the field to grow that field and learn what needs to be learned. So I think NIA doesn't have a lot of no, we won't do that type views on that.
And just one final question before we wrap up. What are your thoughts on the role of, or the way you've seen it play out, about how sort of stakeholder engagement is received in applications to NIH, and sort of the ways investigators, particularly early stage, should be thinking about engaging stakeholders and incorporating that into their research plans?
Oh, I think it's viewed quite positively, and has been done for many years, and currently it's viewed quite positively for a lot of types of applications. I don't think it has to be required, but certainly it gives you perspective that can be quite helpful. So, but it does take some, I think, risk taking, as was said earlier, to try to do it, and beating of the bushes to find the right people. I think it's viewed positively by, if done, well, or proposed and described well.
Wonderful.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for speaking. I just want to point out also one quick thing in the chat. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Winnie or Win Norton from National Cancer Institute posted that if people are interested in cancer, the National Cancer Institute, or NCI, has an interest in de-implementation, and the email is there in the chat. So just another institute interested. Thank you so much, Marcel. Really appreciate your insights today.
Yeah, thanks.